Okay, hi, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. My name is Lisa. I'm the head of channel sales here at Odoo APAC. And we have the pleasure to have with us Catherine, the head of business services in Belgium. Catherine is actually managing a team of more than 65 functional consultants, and their daily jobs is to help some of our customers implement their projects. So she's going to share with us a little bit today about the Odoo Implementation Methodology book and the concept behind it.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. So yeah, what I'm going to do is to summarize a bit what's in the book, and then I think the most important part of this webinar would be to discuss and answer your question about methodology and project. So I'm going to try to make it as fast as possible so that we can jump on the question quickly. So first, so far we've implemented 8,000 projects at Odoo directly. So this is our experience, and this is on what we base our methodology on, this experience, and of course on the amazing success rate we have so far as well. So to summarize the situation, to summarize the methodology, I would say that the most important and the conclusion we've made by going through all of those projects is what really matters actually is to onboard the users on time and on budget. So a few principles, a few lessons learned by implementing all of those projects. The first one is we should focus on standard to ensure the success of the project. It doesn't mean that we don't have to do and we can't do development, but it means that doing development is just justified when we have a good reason to do it, because it has impact on our ability, your ability as well, to maintain it. There is a cost behind. Even for the customer, there is indirect cost in doing development, so you have to make decision about going for development is a huge decision for a project. Another one, maybe that's the most shocking one for our customers, is the fact that we are not going to focus on customer satisfaction. We are going to focus on the project success. Doesn't mean that we don't care about customer satisfaction. It means that we think that customer satisfaction comes with project success actually. And why don't we do that? First, it's because it decreases naturally. So through a project, and it's been proven by other people and us, we didn't invent that, is the fact that customer satisfaction starts high because we decided to go for a project. We want to have a new product, Odoo in our case. And then by going through the implementation, it's natural, it's human to see the satisfaction decrease, and and especially during the go live, because this is the moment where the change occurs for people, so they feel like, okay, everything is going to be different tomorrow, so I'm first frustrated, and then by getting used to the product and to Odoo, I'm going to get better, I'm going to feel better in my use of the system. So, and of course, on top of that, it differs from a person to another. So if you try to focus on customer satisfaction, the thing is you're gonna go on one direction and another. If you take care of the CEO satisfaction and user satisfaction, you're gonna get crazy actually. So focus on the project success, because this is what you are doing actually. And on top of that, in a project disagreement, going to harsh discussion is actually something healthy, because you're gonna increase the level of quality of your services, of what you're going to deliver. And the last one is more an advice for us as implementation service, but for you as well as partners. We always try to sell everything at once from the very beginning. But the thing is, the best approach, in fact, is to first ensure, prove ourselves, and then as soon as the customer is reassured, as soon as we are a bit further in the implementation, we can go for a more complex operation, like huge development, more complex development, for example. So as you can see on the bottom of the slide here, not anymore actually, our job is to be kind of in between customer acquisition and customer retention. So when a customer decides to do a project, to do an implementation with Odoo, the thing is they already signed the contract, but they still need to be reassured. They still need to make sure that it's going to work, and that's the first phase of the project. That's the purpose of the first phase actually. So at this stage, show that the product is a good product, onboard them, reassure them. As soon as it's done, we can go for more complex operation, like for example development. So what I'm going to do now is to take two examples, a really simple, a really complex project, and explain you how we're going to staff the project team and how we're going to implement, how will be the project strategy actually. So the first example is a really simple project with an SME, a small company actually, 5 users. There is no legacy system, and the scope is fully standard sales, invoicing, project timesheet. The budget is limited, and of course, as usual, the deadline is yesterday, so we have to do that as fast as possible. The other example is a huge company, 4,000 users at the end of the project. There is a huge legacy system. It's another integrated software. Everything is going well, but they just want to change software to be more efficient, maybe to reduce the cost, no matter the reason. The scope is exactly the same, sales, invoicing, project, and timesheet. But here, development is required and accepted actually. The budget is, well, it's never unlimited, but the budget is kind of unlimited, and the deadline, just like the other example, it's for yesterday. So how do we staff those kind of projects? So just as a reminder, I think you have a long discussion in the book about all the different profiles. I'm going to go through that very quickly. But how do we staff those kind of projects? I would say we have a lot of different profiles we can use in different projects. On the Odoo side, the first and the main role is the project leader, who is actually the one doing everything as long as it's possible. So what we're going to do in this methodology is to limit the amount of people involved in a project, to limit the cost of knowledge transfer, and too much communication kills a bit the velocity of a project. So one of the principles is to keep it as simple as simple as possible. But we might need other people involved in the project. So for example, we might need in bigger project a project director actually supporting the project leader and ensuring all the politics around the project, attending to the steering committees and stuff like that. We might need app experts. Sometimes the level of complexity imply that someone more experienced or more expert in an area get involved punctually or continuously throughout the project, depending on the project, of course. And of course, we have developers when it comes to customize Odoo. On the customer side, but the most important person is the SPOC, the single point of contact, is actually the project leader on the customer side. So he's going to be the one defining the business need, organizing the training, getting all the end users involved in the project at some point, ready to start using in the reality the system. The sponsors are actually the decision makers, so they are important as well in a project because they are those who actually decided to start the project. So we still have to work with them and make them know that everything is going well. And when it's required and when the SPOC can't do everything on its own, we're going to involve as well key users per department, for example, or type of activity. So if we go back to our examples, the first one, the SME project, how are we going to staff this project? That would be quite simple, actually the simplest possible. The project leader on our side, the SPOC on the other side, and surrounding them potentially a few other people. The first one is the business advisor, the sales. Is always there. Oh, she's always there. Is actually the BFF of the project leader, and is actually the one who's going to support the project, to support the project success as well. So it could play a role to ease the relationship when it comes to a harder phase in the project and stuff like that. But it doesn't have an actual role in the project, in the implementation. And we might need app expert in small project as well. In this case, I don't think it would be the case, but they are always there surrounding us. We might need a developer as well. Sponsors and end users, of course, are always there on the customer side. In a larger account, in our example here, we're going to keep exactly the same structure, so the business advisor, the project leader, and the SPOC to deliver the project. But actually, because it's a bigger company, because it's more complex to understand all the business processes, and to make sure that we have all the information, we're going to have a few more people involved. The project director here, who will be actually responsible to protect the project leader, actually, to make him able to deliver and to focus on the delivery, where he's going to discuss about the project, about the strategy, and control the way we implement the solution. And of course, as I said earlier, different key users who are going to support the SPOC in its role as well. So if you see it a bit differently, of course, project leader, SPOC, and sponsors are going to be part of the steering committee. The project team will be the project director, SPOC, project leader, key users, and developers. But if we focus a bit only on the delivery, what we can see is actually the amount of people actually delivering the solution are not that many people actually. So we limit it to the project leader, key users, and developer. So how do we deliver those kind of projects? So this is the main and global path for a classic project, and I'm not going to go too much into detail here, but just to show you, which is really important, is the project initiation. I think everybody knows that if you fail in this phase, the whole project could be complicated to implement, just because if the customer doesn't have a really good understanding on the way we're going to work, it could be painful throughout the project to make understand why we challenge them, why we try to limit the development, and so on. So here, what we do is to spend quite important amount of time on initiating the project, 15% here. Then we deliver, and then we keep a bit of time to launch them in production, because this is another critical moment in the implementation. So if we check more into details, SMEs project, for example, what we're going to do generally is to let the sales qualify the project, do the first analysis, and directly sales the project to the customer actually. The initiation phase will be only a kickoff, where we're going to perform a gap analysis, complete analysis of the project, just to make sure that everything is under control and that everything is going to be okay. And then we're going to phase it in two main phases. Here, what we're going to do is to deliver first sales invoicing and import the contact history. Do the configuration, the import, no development here, test, validate, set in production, train the users, and get the final validation, and then go live for the first phase, and do exactly the same for project and timesheet in a second phase. In this kind of project, we're gonna generally deliver it in a few weeks. It might be 4 to 5 weeks actually for that kind of scope. We probably won't accept anything in terms of specific development. We're not gonna postpone in the second phase any development either. We're gonna refuse every single development request. Of course, if it's required, if it's justified, if it makes sense, we're going to do it. But generally, in this kind of scope, we're not going to do it. So the training will be only focused on the standard, no user guide generally, and the SPOC will be responsible to train the end users and to manage the change internally. So now, exactly same scope. We're going to organize the delivery completely different for the larger account for a few reasons. The first one is they already have an integrated software, so the thing is switching from the first one to the other, as they already have integration, as everything is already integrated, we're gonna the strategy will be a bit more different. So here we keep the project qualification done by the sales, but what we're going to do as well before selling the project is to perform a gap analysis with the customer to actually list the project requirement, give a budget, a planning, and reassure them on our ability to deliver. The first phase will be actually about all the apps, so sales, invoicing, project timesheet, import contacts, and do certain amount of development, only the very required development, and then following the same process, so test and validation, set in production, user training, and final validation, go live. And then the second phase will be dedicated to to develop the feature we decided to postpone to a later phase. So how does it work here? So it's going to take a few months, generally in this case, just because we have to manage the change internally for 4,000 users. It's important. Generally, on average, on the first phase, what we're going to do is to accept 50% of the development request. We're going to accept 20% on the second phase, and then drop probably 30% of the development requested by the customer. 5% of those development made in phase one are going to be dropped beginning of the second one, because by using the system, actually, generally the users realize that it was not that important, or we can do differently. Odoo is quite easy to use, so the thing is they realize sometimes that, okay, they had something in mind and finally this is not true. So we're going to remove, very regularly we remove development pre-made because they realize it's not useful anymore. And in the second phase, we're going to do exactly the same. Of course, the training will be on the standard and the specific because here it's going to be a bit more important. Here we're going to use key users, so they're going to be in charge of the user guides, and the SPOC and key users are going to train the end users to make sure that everybody is ready to go in production, and the change management is managed by the SPOC. When I say it's managed by the SPOC, I don't say we don't care about that. We coach the SPOC, we warn them, and we tell them how important it could be, but the responsibility is dedicated to the SPOC, because we think that it's much more legitimate to be coached and trained by a colleague than by a complete stranger. So in conclusion, in this methodology, actually what really matters is mindset. And there are a few aspects I would like to highlight before starting the Q&A session. The first one is responsibility. Actually, we are responsible to make our customer feel responsible for his project. Why? Because we can deliver whatever we want. If we don't have a committed customer on the go live, nobody will be ready to start using this solution. No matter the level of quality, actually we need someone in front of us to be and to feel committed in the implementation. Then the customer will be responsible to define what they need and why they need it. As Odoo expert, no matter if we are internally in Odoo or partners, this is exactly the same. As Odoo expert, we define how we're going to achieve this kind of business objective in the solution. And the last one is we actually, we're not there to say yes to the customer, we are there to deliver the best solution possible to the customer. So we demand them to convince us. So when they want something specific, when they want something which is not covered by the standard solution, we are going to start by saying no, actually, and tell them, okay, now you can convince me, give me your argument, I'm going to answer, we're going to find a way to figure out if it's really required for you or not, and then move forward in the project. Another concept is simplicity. The most simple your project is, the more you're going to focus your energy and your time on valuable action. So the thing is, we're going to do less of everything, paperwork, people involved in the project, meetings as well, because we are not going to have a recurring meeting just because we have to. We're going to have a recurring meeting because we know exactly what we're going to complete and achieve through this kind of meeting. Of course, the most standard possible, I think it's clear now, and generally we work on remote, so we actually go on site when it's required, but the most of the time what we're going to do is to work from our office, because we are surrounded by people who know the solution, who can help just in case, and this is much more efficient than being on the customer side, where actually we are alone, and if we need help from another colleague or a specific experience, we are just alone. So we lose time actually by going on the customer side. The last one is we train an Odoo expert internally, and that's one of the key aspects of this methodology. Actually, at the end of the project, what we want is the customer to be independent. For that, we have to make sure that the SPOC will be, at the end of the project, able to play that role, to be the first level of support for all the colleagues internally. So our mission is to make sure that that person is going to embrace the learning the learning phase and the learning process. Yeah, if we have key users, we're going to do it with them as well, so that it's easier for them to manage the amount of requests internally. Of course, keep an eye on the change management, even if, as I explained earlier, the SPOC is responsible for that, and make sure that before the go live, everybody has been trained and is actually ready to start using the solution. The last one is more related to how we staff our teams. The thing is, at the end of the day, what we concluded is the fact that mindset is much more important than actually knowledge. Anyone could learn something, be better and understand better any business area, but the mindset is really important. Being able to say no, being able to take the lead on a situation is much more important than having knowledge. The knowledge, you can always learn it. Of course, knowledge is important as well, and that's why we recruit as well people already having experience in certain area to make the whole team growing. And yeah, the last one is, yeah, we retain people who actually are made for that job, and that's all. But having said all of this, actually, which is really important to keep in mind, is those are principles, we apply them every day, but common sense is the key as well. So depending on the situation, you're going to put the accent on one aspect on another one. You're going to always try to apply everything, but you have to adapt yourself to the reality, and that's why common sense prevails in this methodology as well. And I think I'm done with that summary, so now maybe we can start answering questions.
So thank you for sharing,
My
Catherine. I
pleasure.
think I'd like to invite everyone to please put your questions, if you have any, in the chat, in the live chat on YouTube, and we'll try to go through them. So, you know, we've heard a lot from Catherine, and I think a lot of you have already gone to the implementation book and had a read of it. And I think actually it's very important for a lot of our partners to try and follow this implementation methodology. We've seen previously that, you know, many companies, maybe not just Odoo partners, but other partners of software vendors, have failed to be viable in their business because they've taken on projects with too much development, or development was the first thing they thought of. to go to.
Mm-hmm.
I've had partners come to me and they said, you know, Lisa, our biggest strength is development, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So that already is something of a warning sign, and which is why I think it's very valuable to share the experience of Odoo,
Mm-hmm.
having gone through many kind of failed projects previously in our history. And so I have seen a couple of questions on the live chat on YouTube, but please feel free to write down more. So someone is asking, what does it actually mean, a few weeks for the SME project to go live?
Actually, I think just like me, that an implementation is not the other. So a few weeks, there is no rules actually. So it could change from a project to another, but I would say simple scopes like CRM sales invoicing, project timesheet. If we are 100% standard, and if the customer is ready, that could take. Honestly, we sell packs actually, so we are able to cover that kind of project in a 25 hours pack if everything goes well. So 25 hours pack, that's simple. We usually spend 5 hours a week on a project, so this is 5 weeks.
No, that's actually very short.
Mm.
So does that answer your question? Maybe you can elaborate if you have a specific idea in mind. But maybe just a bit more sharing. Have you, in the history of Odoo project implementation, do you have any examples of failed projects because of various reasons? That you just mentioned that we didn't do well in, or something about the spark wasn't quite right there.
We had just before the Odoo Experience a smart class about methodology, and we shared a huge fail where we actually didn't apply any single principle of this methodology. So we accepted all the development, so we never challenged the customer. And of course, at the end of the project, they were not really satisfied by the solution we provided. So okay.
Yeah.
and so I can't remember the name of that customer. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But the thing is, the consultant started implementing, and it was not self-confident enough to say to the customer, okay, this is not required. You don't need that. This is a bazooka to kill a fly, what you expect to manage your business. And then we did a lot of development, and it was too complex to use actually. So at the end of the implementation, when the end users started the training and stuff like that, they on their side they said, yeah, that's too complex actually, that would be easier to use the standard. And because it took a long time to be implemented and stuff like that, everybody was frustrated, and we finally turned the project actually. Right. That was a huge fail because everybody put a lot of effort on both sides to finally just end the project and not really use it in production. So that was a huge fail, and that made me realize that actually internally I had to re-explain much more the methodology, and take care more about the ability of the consultant to actually feel they can challenge the customer, say no, take the lead. And this is not that easy for the consultant because we hire people quite young, and it's not that easy to say to someone who could be your father or your mom, yeah, no, you're not right, I'm the expert, I'm going to tell you what you have to do and stuff like that. And this is not easy, but as soon as we give them this self-confidence, and as soon as they trust the approach and they understand why it makes sense, it doesn't matter if they are 20 or 50, it doesn't matter, because they believe on what they do. And I think that's one of the key of this methodology. As soon as we give them this belief that they are actually relevant in this job, and that the approach makes sense to the customer as well, they do magic in the project.
And I think this leads on to another question that I just read. How do we provide a representative implementation timeline to the customer during the sales process? I think this ties in a lot with what you just described with the salespeople.
So Yeah, I would say that to have an efficient sales process, first we need skilled salespeople.
Very
Probably one of the most important decision we made a few years ago is to consider that the sales should know the product as well as a consultant. Not as well, but they actually know the product really well. They are able to do a really deep qualification of the project, and that's probably the first key before talking about planning or anything. And I would say that that question is maybe more related to a bigger project than really standard and simple project. Because for a simple project, the thing is, by having the experience, we know more or less how long it should take, depending on the scope of the project. Where, of course, with a bit more of development, there is an unknown area in the project where we still need to go more into details. But what we do actually in this kind of case is to do the gap analysis before the sales. So for those who have read the book, it's already explained. I can summarize it here quickly. The gap analysis is something we do, and this is a consultant actually performing the gap analysis. It's an analysis of the whole scope, and we go through the customer requirement together with the customer. And we already apply the methodology at this moment. So we challenge the customer, we refuse to do a few things, as long as they can't convince us that it's necessary for them to have this kind of functionality. And at the end of the gap analysis, actually what we do is to estimate the cost in time for all the requests made by the customer. And then it's easier to have an idea, a global idea of how long should take every phase. Because at the end of the gap analysis, what we do is to provide the list of requirements, the budget related to that, of course, and the planning as well, based on the discussion we had. So what we're going to do is to define the whole project strategy before signing the actual contract with the customer, but having a much deeper understanding of the customer's business and need as well.
Okay, yeah, I think that's something that's actually very different with how Odoo does, structures the teams as to some other people in the industry. So all of the salespeople at Odoo are actually expected to know the product. I think we don't have specifically a pre-sales group and the salespeople, so it's really much working in a different way. We have another question. Do we need to provide any suggestions on how to improve business processes during the first phase, or do we just try to implement Odoo with the current business processes the customer has?
That's a good question actually, because it's always a trade between you and the customer. Of course, the best, the easiest, and the most sustainable is to make them fit with the actual process in Odoo, and this is not always possible. So the thing is, and this is what the gap analysis is about as well. It's to define actually where it's possible and where it makes sense to make them fit with the process actually existing in Odoo, and when actually the specificity of the customer's business justifies to modify how Odoo works for them. So actually there are mainly roughly 3 main reasons to accept a development. Is first, when the customer's business specificity makes him like unique in the world, when there is a legal requirement not covered by Odoo, it happens, or when there is an impact on the company's image to the rest of the world. We try to respect and we provide to the customer the ability to have the image he wants to have to the market for sure. That's another reason why we accept development. I see that there is a question about is there a template to make a gap analysis? Actually, there is in the appendix of the book a direct link to our templates, so feel free to use them. Don't request access, just duplicate it, because what we're gonna do is to make it evolve by the time, and keep that one as a template for everybody. So feel free to duplicate it and use it in your company. If you have any question about that, don't hesitate to ask questions.
Yeah, definitely. And the link to the implementation methodology book is actually on the webinar and registration page, and also we'll be trying to mail this to all the partners in physical form. So that's coming soon. I think at this point also, Catherine, you shared a story earlier with me about a partner who his business was failing very much a couple of years ago because he wasn't having the right methodology to implement projects. And since then, he's been working, I guess, closely with you and your team. So actually, you showed the charts where the business has grown and the revenue has grown. And it's right now, he's at a very steady place of having good projects that are being finished and pushed to production.
Yeah.
So can you share a bit about
that? Yeah, that's
story?
something actually. That's by promoting the methodology to our partners, there's always a blocking point, which is, as an editor, our source of revenue is not exactly the same as a partner. I would say that Odoo makes the most important part of the revenue on the recurring revenue, where it's completely the opposite for the partners. I would say that service is much more important in the source of revenue. So I had a long discussion with this partner actually, because he decided to switch to the Odoo Implementation Methodology in 2015. And he showed me that graph. I don't know if I can share it now, or I think we can. So hold on, I'm gonna go to the. I'm gonna share this chart if I can find it here. Yeah. So I don't know if you can see it on your side, but that's the chart he shared with me a few weeks ago. So as you can see, actually, he used to do a few projects with a lot of customization, and then we had a discussion, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm kind of interested in doing that, but I don't know exactly how to do that, because I feel that in terms of profitability, there is a risk behind for me, because of course the recurring revenue is not exactly the same than for you. So how can I make sure that it's gonna work?" And I think we conclude together that the secret is to increase the amount of project he did at that moment, and to go more for volume. A lot of small projects, fully standard or almost, then trying to go for a huge project with a lot of customization, a lot of cost of maintenance, because most of the time that's easy cash to do development, because this is a lot of services, a lot of revenue really fast in the process, but at the end of the day costs something to maintain it. Even if you invoice it to your customer, you still have to involve resources by the time to make sure that everything is going to keep working. Where here, what he did actually is to increase really well the amount of customer he had, and he kept them in as standard as possible, as fast as possible as well. And finally, what he told me a few weeks ago is actually now the thing is I'm kind of reverted the trend between the recurring revenue and the non-recurring revenue. So he's almost reaching like a 50-50 ratio in his yearly revenue. So he fight a lot for the recurring revenue, which is actually the secret of security, of safety. He feels safer today than he felt a few years ago, just because he has this guaranteed revenue coming every month. After a few years, he told me, I imagine different ways actually to make recurring revenue beside the classical subscription from Odoo. So he applies it to his custom modules. Actually, he applies exactly the same approach. So when he provide a new functionality or new module to a customer, he apply exactly the same logic. So he say, okay, you're gonna pay that amount of money per month to be able to have the right to use my module, which is kind of smart because he gets everything for that. I think that he had another idea of support subscription, which was actually interesting as well. It's something his customer can use actually every month to get support, but it's covered by something recurring. It's like an insurance. I found it really interesting as well. I think there is a lot of different solutions for a partner to ensure and to increase the recurring part of their revenue, which is actually, I completely agree with him, a good way to secure your revenue and to be profitable as a service provider.
Thank you. I think
my pleasure.
This was one of many cases of successful partners of Odoo, growing their business and really getting to the status of silver and gold and maintaining that. So we see this over and over again, that small, quick projects that are consistent and easily delivered, rather than bigger projects all of the times. This seems to be the key. So,
but actually, by being ready silver or gold, actually by being gold, you get more recurring revenue with the Odoo apps and users and stuff. And the thing is, I don't know. I think it's maybe easier to reach that level of gold partner faster by doing a lot of small and really standard project than trying to get a few very big projects actually.
Yeah, I do agree.
The risk is lower actually because if you lose a customer, you can compensate fast by acquiring another small one. Where when you lose a very big customer, the thing is you have to compensate by finding another very big one.
Right.
So the level of complexity is actually higher.
Definitely, it's like putting all your eggs in one basket. Okay, so we've had, I think, addressed most of the questions there.
We can share the PowerPoint.
We can share the PowerPoint.
But actually there is another presentation, so that was a summary pretty much of what I did during the Odoo Experience. So the complete presentation in the Odoo Experience is maybe a bit more complete than what I presented today, but I can for sure share that one as well.
Or you can also go onto the Odoo YouTube channel and you should be able to find also Catherine's presentation at Odoo Experience.
Oh yeah, that partner actually shared his experience as well with me during this talk. So.
Okay. So I think we've gone through most of the questions there. And if you guys have further questions, please don't hesitate to send them to myself or reach out to your account manager at Odoo for a more in-depth discussion about the implementation methodology.
Okay.
So thank you very much,
Thank you
Catherine,
very
for your
much
time
all
today.
of you.
Thanks everyone for watching.